What happens when a single mother is publicly humiliated and thrown off a plane by a self-righteous pastor, only for that same plane to crash into the Atlantic Ocean minutes later, and the pastor claims she saved everyone through a miraculous vision from God, while her long-lost baby daddy suddenly reappears on live television demanding custody of the daughter he abandoned 6 years ago, and a pastor's scorned wife arrives with evidence that could destroy the biggest church in Lagos, all while the entire nation watches to see if a woman with a shameful past deserves redemption or eternal condemnation. Welcome to Kaysmart Mythic Tales, where we bring you the most gripping African family dramas that will leave you breathless. Thank you for your incredible support. You are the reason we keep bringing these powerful stories to life. Before we dive into the story, kindly subscribe, drop a comment below and tell us where you are watching from. Now let's get into this explosive story. The cabin door slammed shut with a metallic finality that echoed through Adanna Okafor's bones. She stood on the airport tarmac in Lagos, Nigeria, her worn suitcase at her feet, watching the Airbus A320 prepare for takeoff, the plane that had just expelled her like contaminated cargo. "Mama, why are we not flying?" Her daughter Chisholm's voice trembled beside her, the 7-year-old's eyes wide with confusion and fear. Adanna couldn't answer. Her throat had closed around the shame, around the memory of what had just happened inside that aircraft. The stares. The whispers. The businessman in seat 12C who had recognized her face from somewhere she'd spent 5 years trying to forget. That's her. The woman from the videos. She was all over the internet. His voice had cut through the pre-flight announcements like a machete through sugarcane. Heads had turned. Phones had emerged from pockets. Within seconds, her past, carefully buried, desperately hidden, had erupted into her present with volcanic force. The flight attendant, a young woman named Blessing who couldn't have been more than 25, had approached with apologetic eyes but firm instructions. "Ma, the captain says we need you to disembark. Other passengers are uncomfortable." Uncomfortable. As if her mere presence might contaminate their journey. Now, standing in the humid Lagos air, watching the plane taxi toward the runway, Adanna felt Chisholm's small hand slip into hers. Her daughter, innocent, trusting, knew nothing of her mother's past. Nothing of the desperate choices Adanna had made when she was barely 20 years old, pregnant and abandoned, with no education and no options in a city that chewed up vulnerable women and spat out their bones. "We'll catch another flight, my love," Adanna whispered, though she had no idea how she'd afford it. The ticket to Abuja, where a potential job interview waited, where a chance at rebuilding their lives beckoned, had consumed the last of her savings. Behind them, the airport terminal buzzed with life. Travelers dragged designer luggage across polished floors. Businessmen in Agbada robes checked their phones. Families reunited with tears and laughter. Normal people living normal lives, untainted by scandal, unrecognized by strangers who'd seen them at their lowest. Adanna had been one of them once. 6 years ago, before everything fell apart. Before her boyfriend Chukwudi had gotten her pregnant and disappeared like morning mist. Before desperation had driven her to decisions that would haunt her forever. Before the videos that a revenge-obsessed former client had uploaded without her consent, videos that had spread across Nigerian social media like wildfire, destroying any hope of ordinary employment. She'd changed her name. Formerly Ngozi, now Adanna. Changed cities, from Port Harcourt to Lagos. Changed everything she could change. But you couldn't change your face. You couldn't erase the internet. And you couldn't outrun recognition in an age where everyone carried the entire world in their pockets. "Excuse me." A male voice broke through her spiraling thoughts. Adanna turned to find a tall man in his late 40s, distinguished in a tailored navy suit, his graying temples giving him an air of gravitas. His nameplate identified him as Emeka Nwankwo, airport manager. "Mrs. Okafor, I need to speak with you about what just happened." Her heart hammered. Was she about to be banned from the airport entirely? Arrested for some made-up offense? She'd learned that when you were a woman with a shameful past, the system found ways to punish you twice. "I'm leaving," she said quickly, reaching for her suitcase. "I won't cause any trouble." "No, please." He held up a hand, and something in his expression stopped her. Not disgust. Not judgment. Something closer to concern. "Come with me. Both of you. There's something you need to see." She shouldn't trust him. She'd learned not to trust men who approached with kind eyes and promises. But Chisholm was tired, and the sun was brutal, and frankly, what choice did she have? Emeka led them through a side entrance, away from the crowds, into a quiet corridor lined with offices. Other staff members glanced their way, and Adanna braced for more recognition, more shame. But their expressions were different. Curious, yes, but also troubled? He ushered them into a conference room with a large television screen mounted on the wall. "Sit, please." Adanna lowered herself into a chair, pulling Chisholm onto her lap protectively. Emeka picked up a remote and turned on the screen. A news broadcast flickered to life. CNN International. The headline read, "Breaking. Flight LK 507 experiences catastrophic engine failure over Atlantic." Adanna's blood turned to ice. "That's the flight," Emeka said quietly. "The one that just took off. 10 minutes after departure, both engines failed. They're attempting an emergency water landing, but..." He trailed off, his face grave. "It doesn't look good." The screen showed blurry footage from someone's phone, the plane descending rapidly, trailing smoke, passengers screaming in the background. Then the feed cut out. Adanna couldn't breathe. The faces flashed through her mind, the businessman who'd exposed her, blessing the flight attendant, the mother and child who'd been seated behind her, the elderly man by the window. All of them, plummeting toward the Atlantic Ocean. "Oh God," she whispered. "The man who recognized you," Emeka continued, his voice heavy with something she couldn't quite identify. "His name is Obiora Okeke. He's a pastor at Redeemer's Gospel Church in Victoria Island. He's been on television recently, speaking about moral purity and the danger of fallen women in society." The irony was a knife twisting in her gut. A pastor. A man of God who'd condemned her in front of 100 strangers, who'd gotten her thrown off a plane that was now possibly sinking into the ocean with everyone aboard. "Why are you telling me this?" Adanna asked. Emeka met her eyes, and in them she saw a complicated mixture of guilt and determination. "Because what he did to you was wrong. And because..." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Because my sister was like you once. Desperate. Judged. Destroyed by people who claimed moral superiority. She never recovered." The room fell silent except for the distant hum of airport machinery and Chisholm's soft breathing against Adanna's chest. On the screen, the news anchor's voice crackled. "Rescue crews are en route, but chances of survival are..." The door burst open. A breathless security guard stood in the frame, his face pale. "Sir, we have a situation. The passenger manifest has been leaked online. Social media is exploding. People are saying..." He glanced at Adanna, uncomfortable. "They're saying she's lucky. That she was saved. That she's blessed." Adanna's phone, ancient, cracked screen, pay-as-you-go, began vibrating in her bag. She pulled it out with shaking hands. Notifications flooded the screen. Messages from numbers she didn't recognize. Her old social media accounts, dormant for years, suddenly ablaze with activity. One message made her stomach drop. It was from a number in Abuja. The job interview she'd been flying to attend. "We saw the news. Come anyway. You're hired. God clearly has plans for you." The rescue helicopters circled like mechanical vultures over the churning Atlantic waters, their searchlights cutting through the early dusk. Adanna watched from the television in Emeka's office, Chisholm finally asleep on a small couch, exhausted by the day's incomprehensible chaos. The images were horrifying and miraculous in equal measure. The plane had broken apart on impact, its fuselage cracking like an egg, but the pilots had somehow managed to keep the nose up long enough for most passengers to evacuate onto inflatable slides. Bodies bobbed in orange life vests. Rescue boats swarmed the debris field. 73 confirmed survivors so far, the news anchor reported. 27 still missing, presumed dead. This is being called the miracle on the Atlantic, though many families tonight are living through a nightmare. Adanna felt sick. Relief and guilt warred in her chest until she couldn't tell which emotion was winning. She was alive because a pastor had publicly humiliated her. Children were drowning because she'd been forced off that plane. "Stop it," Emeka said, reading her expression. "This isn't your fault. Isn't it?" Her voice cracked. "If I'd never been on that plane, if you'd never been desperate? Never made hard choices? Never been human?" He leaned against his desk, arms crossed. "Adanna, I've worked in this airport for 22 years. I've seen every kind of person pass through these doors. Rich, poor, saints, criminals. You know what I've learned? We're all one bad day away from becoming someone we never thought we'd be. His phone rang. He glanced at the screen, frowned, and answered. Yes? What? His expression shifted from concern to shocked. Are you certain? Send me the link. He hung up and immediately pulled up a website on his computer, turning the screen so Adanna could see. It was a video from a Nigerian news blog, already with over 200,000 views. The video showed Obiora Okeke, the pastor who'd recognized her, being pulled from the water. But something was wrong. The camera zoomed in on his face, and even through the pixelation, his expression was unmistakable. Terror beyond the crash, beyond the drowning, beyond physical fear. A journalist thrust a microphone at him as paramedics wrapped him in a thermal blanket. Pastor Okeke, can you tell us what happened? Obiora's voice came out broken, shattered. She saved me. The woman I kicked off the plane. She saved all of us. Confusion rippled through the assembled reporters. What do you mean? She wasn't on the flight. No, you don't understand. Obiora was shaking, possibly from shock, possibly from something deeper. When the engines failed, when we knew we were going down, I saw her. I saw her face in my mind, and I heard a voice telling me what to do. How to help people evacuate. Where the life vests were malfunctioning. Which exit was safest? A paramedic tried to lead him away, but he pulled back, desperate to continue. I saved 16 people because of what she told me. Because of her voice in my head. The woman I judged. The woman I shamed. God used her to save us. The video cut off. Adanna stared at the frozen screen, unable to process what she just witnessed. That's not possible. I wasn't. It's going viral, Emeka said softly. Every major news outlet in Nigeria is picking it up. International media is calling it a miracle. They're calling you. Stop. Adanna stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I don't want this. I didn't ask for this. None of us ask for our moments of significance, Emeka replied. They simply arrive. Her phone erupted again. This time it was a call from an unknown Lagos number. Against her better judgment, she answered. Ms. Okafor? A woman's professional voice. My name is Folake Adeyemi. I'm a producer with Africa Magic Television. We'd like to interview you for a special broadcast about the crash. We're prepared to offer. Adanna hung up. Immediately, another call. Then another. Text messages poured in like a flood. You're a hero. God has redeemed you. Tell us your story. We knew you were special all along. The same people who'd shared those videos, who'd called her a prostitute and worse, were now calling her blessed. Anointed. Chosen. The hypocrisy made her want to scream. I need air, she gasped, moving toward the door. Wait. Emeka blocked her path gently. You can't go out there. The terminal is full of journalists. Someone leaked that you were here, and now. He gestured toward the window. Adanna looked out and felt her heart sink. Below, in the pickup area, a crowd had gathered. News vans. Camera crews. People holding signs, we believe in you, and God's grace covers all, and, horrifyingly, Adanna the Blessed. I didn't do anything, she whispered. I was just trying to fly to a job interview. That's exactly what makes this so powerful, Emeka said. You're not claiming to be a prophet or a saint. You're just a woman who survived, while a pastor who judged you had some kind of experience. People are desperate for these stories. Especially now. What do you mean, especially now? He pulled up another website, this one a Nigerian news outlet's editorial section. The headline read, When did we become a society that kicks women off planes? The Adanna Okafor story and our collective shame. The article's already been shared 50,000 times, Emeka explained. It sparked a national conversation about how we treat women with pasts, about redemption, about the church's role in public shaming. You've become a symbol. Adanna. Whether you want to be or not. A soft knock interrupted them. A young woman in an airport uniform peeked in. Sir, there's someone here demanding to see Ms. Okafor. She says it's urgent. Her name is Adanna Okafor. Adanna's blood chilled. Okafor. The same surname as the pastor. Should I send her away? The woman asked. Emeka looked at Adanna, leaving the choice to her. Every instinct screamed at Adanna to refuse. Nothing good could come from meeting the family of the man who destroyed her dignity. But something else, curiosity perhaps, or the exhausted resignation of someone who'd already lost everything, made her nod. Send her in. But stay close, she added to Emeka. The woman who entered was in her mid-30s, elegant in a traditional iro and buba despite the late hour. Her eyes were red from crying, but her posture was steel. You're Adanna Okafor, Amara said. Not a question. I am. Amara's gaze swept over her, taking in the worn clothing, the cheap shoes, the sleeping child on the couch. When she spoke again, her voice was barely controlled rage. My husband is Obiora Okeke. The man who humiliated you on that plane. Adanna waited, muscles tensed for another attack. I need you to know something, Amara continued, stepping closer. My husband is not the righteous man he pretends to be. And whatever happened on that plane, whatever he claims to have seen or heard, it's a lie designed to save his reputation. The room fell silent. I don't understand, Adanna managed. Amara's laugh was bitter. Of course you don't. Because you actually are innocent. But my husband. She pulled out her phone, fingers trembling as she scrolled through something. My husband has been having an affair with his secretary for 2 years. I have proof. Bank transfers. Hotel receipts. Text messages. But the church covers for him because he's charismatic and brings in money. She thrust the phone at Adanna, showing a message thread that made Adanna's stomach turn. The pastor, who'd called her a fallen woman, describing explicit acts he wanted to perform with someone named Chidinma. He saw you on that plane, recognized you from those videos, and used you as a distraction, Amara said. To make himself look righteous. To score points with the congregation. And now that the plane crashed and he needs a new narrative, he's created this vision story to seem holy. Why are you telling me this? Adanna asked. Amara's eyes blazed. Because I'm tired. Tired of men like him destroying women like us and calling it God's will. Tired of being silent while he preaches about purity on Sundays and texts his mistress on Mondays. And mostly. She stepped even closer. Because he's planning to use you. He's already scheduled a joint television appearance for tomorrow at Redeemer's Gospel Church. The pastor and the saved woman. A story of divine intervention. He's going to milk this for everything it's worth. Adanna's head spun. I never agreed to. He doesn't need your agreement. He's counting on you being too intimidated to refuse. Too ashamed of your past to challenge a popular pastor. That's how men like him operate. Emeka cleared his throat. Mrs. Okeke, what exactly are you asking Adanna to do? Amara's smile was sharp as broken glass. I'm asking her to come to that church tomorrow. To let my husband set his stage. And then, when he's feeling righteous and safe. She looked directly at Adanna. I want you to tell the truth. All of it. About him, about his hypocrisy, about everything. I'll be there to back you up with evidence. You're asking me to destroy your own husband, Adanna said slowly. No. Amara's voice softened slightly. I'm asking you to stop letting men like him use their platforms to abuse women like us. My marriage is already over. But maybe, just maybe, we can save someone else from becoming his next victim. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. Think about it, Adanna. But decide quickly. The broadcast is at 10 a.m. tomorrow. The whole nation will be watching. After she left, Emeka whistled low. Well, that's a lot. Adanna sank back into her chair, mind reeling. 24 hours ago, her biggest worry had been affording bus fare. Now she was at the center of a national scandal, being asked to expose a prominent pastor's hypocrisy on live television. I can't, she whispered. I can't go on television. I can't. I'm no one. I'm nothing. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who loves emotional drama. You know what I think? Emeka said gently. I think you're exactly the person who needs to do this. Not despite your past, but because of it. You know what it costs to be vulnerable. You know what judgment feels like. That makes you dangerous to men like Obiora. Chisholm stirred on the couch, murmuring in her sleep. Mama. I'm here, baby, Adanna called softly. But even as she comforted her daughter, Amara Okeke's words echoed in her mind. Maybe we can save someone else. How many other women had been shamed by Obiora Okeke? How many had lost jobs, families, dignity because of men like him, who weaponized morality while hiding their own sins? Her phone buzzed one more time. A text from the Abuja employer. Offer still stands. We believe everyone deserves a second chance. You start Monday if you want it. A second chance. God, she wanted that. Wanted to disappear into normalcy, to raise Chisholm in peace, to be invisible. But invisibility was what men like Obiora counted on. Women too ashamed to fight back. Too scared to speak up. If I do this, she said to Emeka, will you be there? At the church? Because I can't. I can't do this alone. His smile was sad and proud at once. I'll be there. I promise. Adanna looked at her sleeping daughter, then at the phone still buzzing with messages from a nation that had overnight decided she mattered. Tomorrow, she would walk into Redeemer's Gospel Church, where she was once again being set up for public humiliation. But this time, she wouldn't go quietly. The church was magnificent in that particular way that wealthy Nigerian congregations favored. All gleaming white marble, gold accents, and massive LED screens that could display scripture verses or, more often, close-ups of the senior pastor's face during sermons. Redeemer's Gospel Church in Victoria Island could seat 3,000 people, and at 9:45 a.m. on this Sunday morning, every seat was filled. Adanna stood in a side entrance, watching the crowd through a crack in the door, her hands trembling despite the heat. Emeka stood beside her, a steady presence in his crisp Sunday suit. Chisholm was with his wife at a nearby cafe, safely away from whatever was about to unfold. You can still leave, Emeka said quietly. No one would blame you. But that wasn't true, and they both knew it. Half of Nigeria was watching via the church's live stream. News outlets had picked up the feed. Her face, once associated with shame, now with miraculous survival, was on every screen from Lagos to London. Ms. Okafor? A young man in a church usher's uniform approached, his expression reverent. Pastor Obiora is ready for you. If you'll follow me? They were led through corridors that smelled of expensive carpet and air conditioning, past offices with nameplates denoting various ministries. Youth, Women's Fellowship, Finance, Media. The production budget for this single church could have fed her neighborhood for a year. The usher stopped outside a green room. Just a moment, please. Through the door, Adanna could hear voices. One she recognized immediately, Obiora Okeke's resonant pastor's baritone, the same voice that had declared her a fallen woman worthy of expulsion. The angle is redemption, he was saying to someone. Not hers, ours. We, the church, show grace to society's outcasts. I saw past her sin to her soul. That's why God used me as a vessel during the crash. Are we clear on the talking points? A younger voice, probably a media coordinator, responded, crystal clear, Pastor. The feeds are ready. We're trending #1 on Twitter Nigeria. Adanna's jaw clenched. Amara had been right. This wasn't about truth or miracles. This was theater, with her cast as the redeemed sinner in Obiora's morality play. The door opened. Obiora Okeke emerged, and seeing him up close, in his element, Adanna understood how he'd built this empire. He was handsome in the way of aging movie stars, distinguished gray temples, warm smile, eyes that crinkled with practiced compassion. His three-piece suit probably cost more than her annual rent. Adanna, he said, opening his arms as if to embrace her. Thank God you're here. I've been praying all night for this moment. She stepped back before he could touch her. His smile faltered slightly. Pastor, she said evenly. I'm here because your wife asked me to come. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, then calculation. Ah yes, Amara. She's been emotional about recent events. Understandably. The crash affected us all. He turned to his media coordinator. Is my wife in the sanctuary? Yes, sir. Third row right side. Good, good. He clapped his hands together, already pivoting back to his performance. Now, Adanna, here's how this will work. I'll introduce you, share my testimony about the vision I received on the plane, and then you'll speak. Keep it simple. Talk about being afraid, about feeling judged, about gratitude for being spared. The people want to see humility and hope. Do they? Adanna said quietly. Not a question. Obiora's eyes sharpened. Is there a problem? Before she could answer, another voice cut through the hallway. Yes, brother. There is a problem. They all turned to see a man in his 60s approaching, dressed in the simple black suit and white collar of a traditional pastor. His face was weathered, his posture slightly stooped, but his eyes were clear and sharp. Pastor Emmanuel, Obiora said, his smile tightening. I wasn't aware you'd be joining us today. Of course you weren't. Pastor Emmanuel Adewale stopped in front of them, his gaze moving from Obiora to Adanna. Because you didn't invite me. You didn't invite any of the Elders' Council. This whole production was arranged without proper oversight. The Elders' Council answers to me, Obiora said coldly. Actually, young man, you answer to the congregation, to the body of Christ, and to God. Emmanuel turned to Adanna, his expression softening. Child, do you know who I am? No, sir, she admitted. I'm one of the founding pastors of this church. Before all this, he gestured at the opulence around them. We met in a school gymnasium with folding chairs. Obiora was a youth leader then, full of fire and genuine faith. I watched him grow. I also watched him change. Pastor Emmanuel, Obiora warned. This isn't the time. It's exactly the time. Emmanuel pulled out his phone, tapping the screen. Last night, I received an interesting package of documents. Bank statements showing unauthorized withdrawals from church funds. Hotel receipts. Text messages between you and a woman named Chidinma Obi, your personal secretary. Explicit messages. Obiora. Messages that reveal a man whose private life contradicts everything he preaches. The color drained from Obiora's face. Those are fabricated. A smear campaign by jealous. Your wife sent them to me, Emmanuel interrupted, along with a video message explaining everything. She's been documenting your infidelity for 2 years, waiting for the right moment to act. Adanna's heart pounded. Amara had set up more than just her confrontation. She'd prepared a full assault. The Elders' Council convened an emergency meeting at 6 a.m. this morning, Emmanuel continued. We've reviewed the evidence. Obiora, effective immediately, you are suspended from all pastoral duties pending a full investigation. For a moment, Obiora just stood there, his carefully constructed mask cracking. Then rage broke through. You can't do this. I built this church. Those seats out there are filled because of me, because of my vision, my leadership. You built a kingdom, Emmanuel said sadly. Not a church. There's a difference. Obiora turned on Adanna, his eyes wild. This is your fault. You and my bitter, vindictive wife. You've been conspiring to destroy me. Actually, Adanna said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice, I didn't know your wife's full plan until just now. But I'll tell you what I do know, Pastor. She stepped closer, meeting his eyes. I know what it feels like to be publicly humiliated. You made sure I learned that lesson on the plane. You knew exactly what would happen when you pointed at me and announced my past to everyone around us. You should have been ashamed, he spat. Your past. My past is mine, she cut him off. I made choices I'm not proud of when I was desperate and alone. But I never stood in a pulpit and claimed moral authority while texting my mistress. I never took money meant for God's work and spent it on hotel rooms. I never wore a wedding ring while betraying my vows. The media coordinator had backed away, clearly realizing this was not going according to script. Through the walls, they could hear the worship team starting their final song before the sermon. Emmanuel placed a hand on Adanna's shoulder. Child, you don't have to go out there. This has already become something much bigger than your story. No, she said firmly. I do have to go. Because he's right about one thing. Those 3,000 people came here expecting to see me. They came expecting a miracle story. They deserve to hear the truth instead. Comment your thoughts on her decision below. Obiora laughed bitterly. You think they'll believe you? A prostitute over a pastor? I've built trust with these people for 15 years. Then let's find out, Adanna said. Emmanuel nodded slowly. Very well. But I'll be on that stage with you. Both of you. This congregation deserves transparency. As they moved toward the sanctuary entrance, Emeka fell into step beside Adanna. You're incredibly brave, he whispered. I'm terrified, she admitted. But I'm more tired of being afraid than afraid of speaking up. The sanctuary doors opened. The worship team transitioned into a final chord, and the congregation settled into their seats. Adanna stepped into the light, and 3,000 faces turned toward her. The LED screens flickered to life, displaying her face in high definition. She saw herself as the crowd saw her. Simple church dress borrowed from Emeka's wife, minimal makeup, the face of a woman who'd been through hell and somehow survived. Emmanuel took the main microphone, his voice carrying easily through the space. Good morning, beloved congregation. I know this isn't the service you were expecting, but God often works in unexpected ways. Today, we're going to have a conversation about truth, about grace, and about the difference between building kingdoms and building faith. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. People pulled out phones, already texting, recording, sharing. Adanna could see confusion on many faces, concern on others. Obiora stood to the side, trapped by cameras and expectations, his expression a mask of barely controlled fury. I want to introduce you to Adanna Okafor, Emmanuel continued. Many of you have heard her name in the past 24 hours. You've heard about her being removed from the plane that crashed. You've heard Pastor Obiora's claims about visions and divine intervention. But now, I think it's time you heard from Adanna herself. He handed her the microphone. For a moment, Adanna couldn't move. The weight of all those staring eyes, of the cameras broadcasting her face across Nigeria and beyond, paralyzed her. She thought of Chisholm, safe in a cafe, who would one day be old enough to watch this video. What lesson did she want her daughter to learn? She stepped forward. My name is Adanna Okafor, she began, her voice barely steady. But some of you might remember me as Ngozi, the woman from the videos that went viral 5 years ago. The woman Pastor Obiora recognized on the plane and had removed because my presence made other passengers uncomfortable. Gasps echoed through the sanctuary. On the screens, she could see Amara sitting in the third row, tears streaming down her face, but her expression fierce with vindication. I was a sex worker, Adanna continued, the words like glass in her throat. Not because I wanted to be. Not because I was immoral or evil. But because I was 20 years old, pregnant, abandoned, and desperate. I did what I thought I had to do to survive and keep my baby alive. A woman in the front row called out, God forgives you, sister. Maybe he does, Adanna replied. But people don't. People like Pastor Obiora, who preach forgiveness on Sunday but practice judgment every other day of the week. Who recognized me on that plane and decided I didn't deserve dignity. Who made sure everyone knew my shame. She turned to face Obiora directly. And then when the plane crashed and you needed a new story to make yourself look holy, you claimed I saved you through some divine vision. But we both know that's not true. Don't we, Pastor? Obiora's mouth opened, closed. The cameras captured every second of his struggle. Emmanuel stepped forward again. There's something else the congregation needs to know. He held up his phone, displaying it on the main screens. Evidence of financial impropriety. Evidence of adultery. Evidence that the man you've trusted with your spiritual lives has been living a lie. The sanctuary erupted. Shouts. Prayers. Some people stood, others sat in stunned silence. The worship team, still on stage, looked at each other in confusion. And then from the third row, Amara stood. She walked to the front, her heels clicking against the marble floor, and took the microphone from a shell-shocked Adanna. I'm Amara Okeke, she said, her voice amplified across the space. Obiora's wife of 12 years. Mother of his 2 children. And the woman he's been lying to while preaching about Christian marriage every Sunday. She began to speak, laying out the timeline of discovery, the evidence she'd collected, the night she'd cried herself to sleep while her husband returned from ministry meetings that were actually hotel rooms with his secretary. Adanna watched it all unfold, feeling oddly detached. This wasn't her story anymore. It was bigger, messier, more complex than one woman's redemption arc. But then she saw him. A man in the back row, standing up, his face contorted with emotion. He pushed through the crowd, making his way toward the front, and as he got closer, Adanna's entire world tilted. She knew that face. Had memorized it 6 years ago when it had promised her love and then disappeared. Chukwudi Ease. The father of her child. He reached the front of the sanctuary, breathing hard, and pointed at Obiora. You want to talk about fallen women? About shame. His voice cracked. That's my daughter's mother you humiliated. That's the woman I abandoned when she needed me most. And you dare to stand in judgment? The sanctuary fell silent. Chukwudi turned to Adanna, tears streaming down his face. I've been trying to find you for 3 years. To apologize. To make it right. I saw you on the news yesterday and I knew I had to finally face what I'd done. Adanna couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. This couldn't be happening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who loves emotional drama. I don't expect forgiveness, Chukwudi continued. I don't deserve it. But our daughter deserves a father. And you deserve to know that I've never stopped regretting the day I left. Behind them, Obiora suddenly lunged for the microphone, his composure completely shattered. This is a circus. All of you, tearing down a man of God because one fallen woman. Stop calling her that. The voice came from the crowd. Blessing, the flight attendant who'd escorted Adanna off the plane. She stood in her church clothes, her face streaked with tears. I was there when you humiliated her. I watched her face as she walked off that plane. And I've felt sick about it ever since. She showed more grace in that moment than you're showing right now. Other voices joined in. Passengers from the flight, people who'd been there, who'd witnessed the original shame. Emmanuel raised his hands, trying to restore order, but the sanctuary had become something else. A confessional, a courtroom, a reckoning. And in the center of it all stood Adanna, surrounded by the wreckage of lies and the terrifying possibility of truth. The church's live stream crashed under the weight of simultaneous viewers. Hashtags exploded across social media. Hashtag justice for Adanna, hashtag fake pastor, hashtag redemption story. But in the midst of the chaos, as security guards moved to escort an apoplectic Obiora out of his own church, as Amara wept and the congregation shouted and Chukwudi stood frozen waiting for a response, Adanna felt something unexpected. Peace. Not because everything was fixed. Not because her problems were solved. But because, for the first time in 6 years, the truth was out in the open, ugly and complicated and human. She looked at Chukwudi, the man who'd broken her heart and destroyed her life. At Amara, the woman whose courage had made this moment possible. At Emmanuel, the elder who'd chosen truth over reputation. At Emeka, standing faithful at the back of the sanctuary. I need air, she said to no one in particular. And she walked off the stage, leaving them all behind, and stepped out of Redeemer's Gospel Church into the bright Lagos morning, where the real work of healing could finally begin. The video clip circulated for 72 hours straight, each one dissected and analyzed by Nigerian social media with the intensity usually reserved for political scandals or celebrity marriages. Hashtags rose and fell. Think pieces proliferated. Every blogger, pastor, and public intellectual had an opinion about what had unfolded at Redeemer's Gospel Church. Adanna watched almost none of it. She sat instead in Emeka's modest guest room in Surulere, Chisholm playing with borrowed toys on the floor, trying to process the simple fact that her daughter's father, absent for 6 years, was somewhere in Lagos, wanting to talk. Mama, when can we go home? Chisholm asked for the 3rd time that morning. Home. The tiny 2-room apartment in Mushin that Adanna rented month to month, where neighbors knew her as the quiet single mother who kept to herself. Could they even go back there? The landlord had already called twice, asking if she was the woman from the videos. His tone hadn't sounded friendly. Soon, my love, Adanna lied, pulling her daughter close. A knock at the door made them both jump. Emeka's voice came through. Adanna? There's someone here to see you. Says it's important. Her heart hammered. Who? She says her name is Dr. Nena Obi. From Women's Advocacy Coalition of Nigeria. Adanna had heard of them, a non-profit that provided legal aid and support to women escaping abuse, trafficking, exploitation. She'd thought about reaching out to them once, years ago, but pride or shame or fear had stopped her. She opened the door to find a woman in her early 50s, elegant in traditional Ankara fabric, with gray-streaked locks and intelligent eyes that held both warmth and calculation. Ms. Okafor, Dr. Nena said, extending her hand. I apologize for the intrusion, but I've been trying to reach you since Sunday. Your phone has been disconnected. Adanna had thrown her old phone in a trash bin Monday morning, unable to handle the deluge of messages. Some supportive, many cruel, all overwhelming. "I'm sorry. I've been processing." "I understand." Dr. Nena glanced at Chisholm, then back at Adanna. "May we speak privately?" 5 minutes later, they sat in Emeka's small living room, cups of tea growing cold between them. Dr. Nena pulled out a tablet, swiping through what appeared to be legal documents. "I'll be direct," she began. "What happened to you on that plane was illegal discrimination. Nigerian aviation law prohibits removal of passengers based on social status or past occupation unless there's a legitimate safety concern. Pastor Okeke's recognition of you does not constitute such a concern." Adanna blinked. "I don't understand. You want me to sue the airline?" "The airline, yes. But more importantly, we want to use your case to establish precedent. You're not the first woman to face this kind of treatment, but you are, unfortunately, the most visible. Your story has sparked a national conversation about how we treat women with pasts. We want to turn that conversation into actual change." "I don't want to be visible," Adanna said quietly. "I want to disappear." Dr. Nena's expression softened. "I know. But visibility isn't always a choice we make. Sometimes it's thrust upon us. The question becomes what we do with it." She set down her tablet. "There are currently 17 cases in our files of women who were fired from jobs, evicted from homes, or denied services because of their sexual pasts. Most involved intimate partner revenge porn or survival sex work. None of them have the platform to fight back." "You do." "I have nothing," Adanna protested. "No education, no money, no." "You have truth," Dr. Nena interrupted. "You have the attention of an entire nation. And you have women across Nigeria who see themselves in your story. That's more powerful than money." Before Adanna could respond, Emeka appeared in the doorway, his expression troubled. "The news is reporting that Chukwudi Ease gave an exclusive interview to Channels TV. It's airing in 10 minutes. Adanna's stomach dropped. "What?" They crowded around Emeka's television as the familiar Channels TV logo appeared. The news anchor, Aderoran Kemdi, looked directly into the camera with practiced solemnity. In an exclusive interview, Chukwudi Ease, the man who identified himself as the father of Adanna Okafor's child during Sunday's dramatic church service, speaks out for the first time about his past, his regrets, and his hopes for reconciliation. The screen cut to Chukwudi, sitting in what appeared to be an upscale hotel room, dressed in an expensive suit. He looked polished in a way Adanna didn't remember. Successful, confident, nothing like the struggling university graduate she'd fallen in love with. "I was young and stupid," Chukwudi began, his voice heavy with emotion. "When Ngozi, Adanna, told me she was pregnant, I panicked. I was barely 23, still in school, with no job and no prospects. My family would have disowned me for getting a girl pregnant outside marriage. So I ran." He paused, wiping his eyes. "It's the worst thing I've ever done." Aurora leaned forward. "Mr. Ease, you clearly landed on your feet. Can you tell our viewers about your current situation?" "I completed my master's degree in business administration 3 years ago. I now work as a regional manager for a telecommunications company. I make good money. I'm stable." He looked directly into the camera. "And I want to be a father to my daughter. I want to give Adanna and Chisholm the life they deserve." Adanna felt cold. Something about his tone, about the setup of this entire interview, felt wrong. The interview continued. Chukwudi spoke eloquently about personal growth and redemption, about how seeing Adanna's face on the news had broken something open inside him. He spoke about wanting to provide for his daughter, about plans he'd already made to enroll her in a good private school, about his regrets and hopes. But he never once said he'd tried to contact Adanna directly. Never mentioned seeking her permission before going public. Never acknowledged that his sudden appearance might be traumatic rather than redemptive. "He's using you," Dr. Nena said flatly when the interview ended. "He's rebuilding his own image as the repentant father rather than the man who abandoned a pregnant girlfriend." "You don't know that," Adanna said, but even as she spoke, she felt the truth of it. The hotel room. The expensive suit. The media-trained responses. Chukwudi hadn't stumbled into that church Sunday morning. He'd planned his entrance for maximum impact. Emeka's phone rang. He answered, listened, then hung up with a curse. That was security at my office. There are journalists outside your old apartment in Mushin. Your landlord gave them the address. Of course he did, Adanna whispered. The landlord who'd been so eager to rent to a quiet single mother was probably thrilled at the attention. You can't go back there, Dr. Nena said firmly. Not safely. We have a shelter. I'm not going to a shelter. Adanna stood, anger finally breaking through the numbness. I've spent 6 years living in survival mode, hiding, apologizing for existing. And now everyone wants a piece of me. Chukwudi wants to play father. The media wants a story. Even you, she gestured at Dr. Nena, want to use my case for legal precedent. Does anyone care what I actually want? Silence filled the room. Dr. Nena was the first to speak, her voice gentle but firm. What do you want, Adanna? The question hung in the air. Adanna realized she didn't have an answer. For so long, her wants had been simple. Safety for Chisholm, enough money to survive, invisibility. But those simple wants had been shattered on an airport tarmac 3 days ago. I want. She started, then stopped. Started again. I want to take my daughter to Abuja for that job interview. I want to work in a quiet office where no one knows my face. I want Chisholm to grow up without shame. I want to be boring. That life is gone, Emeka said sadly. Even if you change your name again, move cities again, someone will recognize you. The internet doesn't forget. Adanna thought of the videos still circulating somewhere in the digital ether, permanent testimony to her worst moments. Thought of the plane footage, the church confrontation, the countless photos taken without her consent. Emeka was right. There was no going back to invisibility. Another knock at the door. This time, Emeka returned with a courier envelope. It's addressed to you. From a law firm. Adanna's hands shook as she opened it. Inside was a formal legal document on expensive letterhead. Ease and Associates, Family Law Specialists. It was a petition for custody. Chukwudi was suing for joint custody of Chisholm, citing his newfound stability and Adanna's questionable lifestyle and recent involvement in public controversies that may adversely affect the child's well-being. The room spun. He can't do this. He abandoned us. He has no right. Unfortunately, Nigerian family law is complex, Dr. Nena said, scanning the document. If he can prove he's the biological father and demonstrate financial stability, the courts often favor paternal involvement regardless of past absence. She looked up. Especially if they can paint the mother as unfit. Unfit. Adanna's voice cracked. I've kept her alive, fed, clothed, educated for 6 years on my own. But you're also the woman from the videos, Dr. Nena said bluntly. A judge might see that differently than we do. Particularly if Chukwidi's lawyers paint a picture of you as someone whose past work and current controversy creates an unstable environment for a child. Adanna sank to the floor, the legal papers scattering around her. Everything she'd built, every sacrifice she'd made, every humiliation she'd endured, all of it to keep Chisholm safe and hers. And now, the man who destroyed her life wanted to take even that. Comment your thoughts on her redemption below. Chisholm's small voice came from the doorway. Mama? Why are you crying? Adanna looked up at her daughter, 7 years old, bright-eyed, innocent of all the complicated ugly adult drama swirling around them. In that moment, something shifted inside her. She stood, wiping her eyes, and the fear transformed into something harder. Fury. Dr. Nena, she said, her voice steady now. If I agree to your legal case, the discrimination suit, the precedent setting, all of it, can you help me fight for my daughter? Dr. Nena smiled, sharp and satisfied. Absolutely. And Adanna? We're very good at what we do. Then let's do it. Adanna picked up the custody papers, her hands no longer shaking. I've spent 6 years running from my past, from judgment, from confrontation. But I'm done running. Chukwudi wants a public battle? Obiora wanted to use me as a prop? Fine. Let's show them what happens when you back a desperate woman into a corner. Emeka grinned. Now that's the Adanna the nation needs to see. There's one more thing, Dr. Nena said. The Women's Advocacy Coalition is planning a public forum next week. Redemption, dignity, and the rights of women with pasts. We'd like you to speak. Not as a victim, but as an advocate. Are you interested? Every instinct screamed no. Speaking in public, making herself more visible, painting an even bigger target on her back, it was madness. But then she thought of the 17 women in Dr. Nena's case files. The women too scared or ashamed to fight back. The future Adannas who would face the same discrimination unless someone stood up now. I'll do it, she said. But on one condition. Name it. I want to meet those 17 women first. I want to hear their stories. Because if I'm going to speak for them, I need to understand what I'm speaking for. Dr. Nena extended her hand. Deal. As they shook, Emeka's TV flickered back to life with breaking news. The anchor's voice was urgent. We're receiving reports that Pastor Obiora Okeke has filed a defamation lawsuit against his wife Amara and several church elders, claiming conspiracy to destroy his reputation. Additionally, Redeemer's Gospel Church's board of directors has released a statement standing behind Pastor Okeke, calling Sunday's events an orchestrated attack by Satan to bring down a man of God. Adanna and Dr. Nena exchanged glances. It's starting, Dr. Nena said. The backlash. Men like Obiora don't go down without fighting dirty. Let him fight, Adanna replied. I've been fighting my whole adult life. The difference now is I'm not fighting alone. Outside, Lagos hummed with its usual chaotic energy. Okadas weaving through traffic, street vendors calling their wares, millions of lives intersecting and diverging in the endless dance of survival. Somewhere in that vast city, Chukwudi was preparing his custody battle. Obiora was planning his revenge. Journalists were crafting their narratives. But in Emeka's small living room, surrounded by people who'd chosen to stand with her rather than against her, Adanna felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Dangerous, fragile, terrifying hope. The Women's Advocacy Coalition's community center in Yaba occupied the ground floor of a renovated colonial building, its walls painted a defiant shade of purple. When Adanna arrived Thursday morning, escorted by Emeka and shadowed by a private security guard Dr. Nena had insisted upon, she found herself facing a semicircle of 17 women whose eyes held varying degrees of hope, skepticism, and exhaustion. They ranged in age from 19 to 53. Some wore professional clothing, others traditional wrappers, one in jeans and a faded university t-shirt. United only by the common thread of having their pasts weaponized against their futures. Thank you for coming, Dr. Nena said, addressing the group. I know many of you took enormous risks just to be here. I want you to meet Adanna Okafor, whose story you've probably seen on the news. A young woman near the front, couldn't have been more than 20, laughed bitterly. The blessed woman who survived the plane crash. Lucky you. Kemi, Dr. Nena warned gently. No, she's right, Adanna said, surprising herself. I'm not lucky. I'm just visible. Which, in some ways, makes me more vulnerable than any of you. The women shifted uncomfortably. Kemi's expression remained challenging. My ex-boyfriend posted intimate photos of me online when I broke up with him, another woman said quietly. Her name was Blessing. Different from the flight attendant, this Blessing was a lawyer who'd lost her job at a prestigious firm when the photos surfaced. I reported him to the police. They told me I should have chosen better men, and that there was nothing they could do unless I could prove distribution. I was trafficked from Benin to Lagos at 16, said Patience, a woman in her 30s with scars visible on her arms. Forced into prostitution for 3 years before I escaped. Now I run a small restaurant, but customers who recognize me refuse to eat my food. They say I'm dirty. Like trauma is contagious. One by one they shared. Chioma, fired from her teaching job when parents discovered she'd briefly done webcam work to pay for her mother's surgery. Yatund, evicted from her apartment when her landlord found out about her past. Funmi, whose husband used her survival sex work to win full custody of their children, painting her as morally unfit despite the fact that she'd stopped that work years before they met. Each story was a variation on the same theme. Women punished eternally for temporary survival strategies. Women whose pasts were permanent scarlet letters while men's pasts were dismissed as youthful indiscretion. By the time the last woman finished speaking, Adanna was crying. Not delicate tears, but ugly body-shaking sobs for all the collective pain in that room, for all the ways society broke women and then blamed them for being broken. I don't know how to fix this, she admitted when she could finally speak. I don't know if a lawsuit or a forum or even 100 news stories will change anything. Because this isn't really about laws. It's about how people think. How they judge. But judgment starts somewhere, Dr. Nena said. It starts with stories that become cultural norms. It starts with religious leaders who use women's sexuality as proof of moral failure while ignoring their own. It starts with laws that protect men's reputations more carefully than women's lives. Kemi, the young skeptic, spoke again. So what's your plan? Give a nice speech at your forum and feel better about yourself. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who loves emotional drama. Adanna met her eyes. No. My plan is to stop letting people like Pastor Obiora control the narrative. To stop letting men like my ex Chukwudi pretend abandonment equals redemption. To stop being ashamed of surviving. She stood, addressing the whole group. Dr. Nena wants me to speak at the forum next week. I'll do it. But I won't speak alone. I want all of you on that stage with me. Silence fell over the room. That's not realistic, Blessing the lawyer said carefully. Most of us can't afford the exposure. I'm still trying to get hired somewhere. If I go public. If you stay hidden, nothing changes, Adanna interrupted. I understand the fear. God knows I've lived it. But I've also learned something this week. Silence protects our abusers more than it protects us. They're counting on our shame to keep us quiet. Easy for you to say. Kemi shot back. You're already exposed. You've got nothing left to lose. I have my daughter, Adanna said sharply. Her father is trying to take her from me using my past as ammunition. So no, I have everything to lose. But I'm also tired of losing alone. Patience, the trafficking survivor, slowly raised her hand. I'll do it. I've been hiding for 15 years. Maybe it's time people knew what really happened to girls like me. Another hand went up. Then another. By the time Dr. Nena counted, 11 of the 17 women had agreed to speak publicly at the forum. This is going to be explosive, Dr. Nena warned. Once you go public, you can't take it back. There will be backlash. Trolls. Maybe threats. Are you absolutely certain? Adanna looked around the circle, seeing her own fear and determination reflected in those faces. We're certain. Because if not us, then who? If not now, then when? The rest of the week passed in a blur of preparation. Dr. Nena's legal team worked around the clock on the airline discrimination case, digging up precedents and building arguments. The forum was scheduled for Tuesday evening at the National Theatre in Iganmu, a venue large enough to hold 800 people, all of whom had registered within 48 hours of the announcement. Meanwhile, the backlash had begun in earnest. Redeemer's Gospel Church released a video statement featuring testimonials from congregation members defending Pastor Obiora. He changed my life, one woman wept. Saved my marriage, said a man. These accusations are from the pit of hell, declared an elder. The video went viral, racking up millions of views and spawning a counter hashtag. Hashtag I stand with Pastor Obiora. Chukwudi appeared on another talk show, this time with a team of lawyers, framing his custody petition as a father's righteous attempt to rescue his daughter from her mother's chaotic lifestyle. He spoke movingly about wanting to provide stability, education, opportunities that Adanna allegedly couldn't offer. He's painting himself as the hero, Emeka observed, watching the broadcast in his living room where Adanna had essentially taken up residence. And you as the obstacle to Chisholm's well-being. Let him, Adanna said, though her hands were clenched. The custody hearing is next month. Dr. Nena's people are gathering evidence of my fitness as a mother. School records, medical records, testimony from neighbors. We'll counter his narrative. But privately, she was terrified. What if the judge sided with Chukwudi? What if being the woman from the videos did make her legally unfit? She'd heard of cases where women lost custody for less, for being too poor, too young, too unconventional. On Monday evening, the night before the forum, Adanna couldn't sleep. She stood on Emeka's small balcony, watching Lagos sprawl beneath a smog-hazed sky, when her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. But something made her pick up. Adanna Okafor? A woman's voice, trembling with emotion. Yes. My name is Chidinma Obi. I was Pastor Obiora's secretary. The woman he had the affair with. Adanna's grip tightened on the phone. What do you want? To warn you. Chidinma's breath hitched. He's planning something for tomorrow. At your forum. I don't know all the details, but I overheard him on the phone with someone. He said, "They think they've won, but I'll show them what happens when you come against God's anointed." Ice flooded Adanna's veins. What kind of something? I don't know. But he sounded dangerous. Not like the man I thought I knew. I'm scared, Adanna. For you, for his wife, for all of us. He's not going to let this destroy him quietly. After she hung up, Adanna immediately called Dr. Nena, who listened grimly and promised to increase security at the venue. But both women knew that security could only do so much against a man who'd built his empire on charisma and manipulation. Tuesday evening arrived with a weight of inevitability. The National Theatre's parking lot overflowed with cars, motorcycles, and people on foot. News vans lined the streets. Security guards checked bags at the entrances. Inside, the theater hummed with anticipation. Journalists, activists, curious citizens, and a striking number of women who looked like they'd come seeking something more than entertainment. Backstage, the 17 women gathered in a green room that smelled of old velvet and nervous sweat. Some prayed. Others paced. Kemi sat in a corner, her leg bouncing with anxiety. "I can't do this," she said suddenly. "I can't go out there." Patience sat beside her, taking her hand. "Yes, you can. We all can. Because we're not going out there as victims. We're going out there as survivors who refuse to be silent anymore." Dr. Nena appeared in the doorway. 5 minutes. The theater is full. We're live streaming to about 50,000 viewers online, and that number's climbing. Adanna felt her stomach turn over. 50,000 people about to hear her story. About to judge whether her pain was valid, whether her survival was justified. "There's something else," Dr. Nena added, her expression troubled. Pastor Obiora just arrived. With about 200 members of his congregation. They're in the back section and they're loud. Of course he was here. The man who'd started this entire cascade by pointing at her on a plane was not going to miss the final act. "What do we do?" Blessing the lawyer asked. Adanna thought of Chidinma's warning. Thought of everything Obiora had already done. The public humiliation, the false miracle story, the defamation lawsuit against his own wife. Thought of how men like him always tried to control the narrative. "We do exactly what we planned," she said firmly. "We tell the truth. And we don't let him intimidate us into silence." The stage manager gave them the signal. Dr. Nena walked out first to introduce the program, her voice strong and clear through the sound system. Then, one by one, the women filed onto the stage. The lights were blinding. The audience was a dark mass of faces and phone screens. Somewhere in that mass sat Obiora Okeke and his congregation. Somewhere else sat Emeka and his wife, who'd insisted on bringing Chisholm to show her that her mother was brave. Somewhere sat journalists ready to twist every word. Somewhere sat women who desperately needed to hear they weren't alone. Adanna stepped to the microphone first, as they'd rehearsed. "My name is Adanna Okafor," she began. "And I am done being ashamed." From the back of the theater a voice shouted, "Repent, sinner! Repent before God." It was starting. The shout from the back of the theater hung in the air like a challenge. Adanna gripped the microphone, feeling the eyes of 800 people, and 50,000 online viewers, boring into her. The stage lights made it impossible to see who had yelled, but she knew. Obiora's congregation had come to disrupt. To reclaim the narrative. To silence. Dr. Nena stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tension. "There will be no interruptions. Security will escort out anyone who—" "Let them stay," Adanna said, surprising herself and everyone else. She turned to face the back section where Obiora's people sat, a sea of matching church t-shirts emblazoned with the Redeemer's Gospel logo. "Let them hear what they came to silence." She took a breath and continued. "Last week, I was removed from a plane because a man recognized my face from videos that were posted online without my consent 5 years ago. Videos from a time in my life when I was desperate, abandoned, and surviving the only way I knew how. That man was Pastor Obiora Okeke, who sits somewhere in this theater tonight." Murmurs rippled through the audience. Phones angled toward the back section, where Obiora sat in the center of his delegation, his expression unreadable from the stage. "He told the flight attendants I made passengers uncomfortable. What he meant was, my past made him uncomfortable. My survival made him uncomfortable. The fact that I dared to exist in the same space as righteous people made him uncomfortable. Because you're a prostitute. The same voice from before. This time Adanna could pinpoint it. A woman in her 50s, standing in the Redeemer's Gospel section. Her face contorted with righteous fury. You sold your body. You violated God's law. I did, Adanna said simply, and the audience gasped at her directness. When I was 20 years old and 6 months pregnant, when the father of my child disappeared and my family disowned me, when I had no education and no options, I sold my body to feed the baby growing inside me. I am not proud of that time. But I am not ashamed of surviving it either. She gestured to the 16 women standing with her on stage. Each of these women has a story. Different circumstances, same judgment. We've been called prostitutes, sluts, fallen women, sinners. We've lost jobs, homes, custody of our children. We've been treated like our pasts are more important than our present or our future. Patience stepped to a second microphone. Her voice was quieter than Adanna's but steady. I was trafficked at 16 by a man who promised me a restaurant job in Lagos. Instead, I spent 3 years being sold to men who didn't care that I was a child. That I was terrified. That I wanted to die. That's tragic, someone called out. Not from Obiora's section, but from the general audience. A man's voice. Sympathetic. But what does that have to do with Pastor Okeke? Everything, Patience replied. Because after I escaped and built a new life, Pastor Okeke came to eat at my restaurant. And when he recognized me, from a photo that had circulated among his church's men's ministry as a cautionary tale, he stood up in my restaurant and announced to everyone that I was a former prostitute. Customers walked out. Word spread. Within a month, I'd lost 70% of my business. The theater erupted. Denials from Redeemer's Gospel section. Outrage from elsewhere. Dr. Nena had to call for order twice. Obiora himself stood, his voice amplified somehow. He must have brought his own microphone. That is a lie. I have never. You were there on March 15, 2024. Patience cut him off, her quiet voice suddenly steely. You ordered jollof rice and fried chicken. You paid with a church credit card. I have the receipt. And I have testimony from 5 witnesses who heard what you said. She held up a folder. It's all here. Documented. Just like you documented your affair with your secretary in hotel receipts and text messages. Just like you documented your misuse of church funds. You're very thorough, Pastor. Except when it comes to covering your tracks. Someone in the audience started clapping. Then another. Soon, half the theater was applauding Patience, while Obiora's section sat in stony silence. Obiora's face had gone red. This is an orchestrated attack. These women have been coached, paid probably, to destroy a man of God. Actually, a new voice interrupted. Amara Okeke walked onto the stage from the wings, elegant and composed despite the chaos. I'm the one who orchestrated this, as you call it. Your wife. The woman you've been lying to for 12 years. The theater went absolutely silent. Amara approached the microphone, and Adanna stepped aside, giving her space. I spent 2 years collecting evidence of my husband's affairs, his financial impropriety, his abuse of power. Not because I enjoyed it, but because I knew that when I finally spoke up, I would need proof. Because I knew that in Nigeria, a man's word, especially a pastor's word, carries more weight than a woman's truth. She pulled out her phone, connecting it to the theater's projection system. I'm going to show you something. Text messages between my husband and various women over the past 5 years. Hotel receipts. Bank transfers. Some of these women were church members. Some were his staff. All of them were vulnerable in some way. Don't you dare! Obiora roared, moving down the aisle toward the stage. Security guards immediately blocked his path. I dare, Amara said quietly. Because if I don't, you'll destroy another woman. And another. And another. This ends tonight. The screens lit up with message after message. Explicit texts. Promises of promotion in exchange for sexual favors. Threats disguised as spiritual counsel. The evidence was overwhelming and damning. Someone in the audience started crying. Then others. Some were crying for Amara. Some for the women Obiora had manipulated. Some, Adanna suspected, were crying because they believed in him, trusted him, built their faith on the foundation of his teachings. Obiora stood frozen in the aisle, his face ashen. His congregation sat in varying states of shock and denial. Some were already leaving, pushing past the security guards, unable to witness more. "This is not about destroying you," Amara continued, her voice breaking slightly. "This is about stopping you from destroying anyone else. About accountability. About admitting that being anointed doesn't make you above consequences." Dr. Nena stepped forward again. "We are formally announcing tonight that 11 women have joined a class action lawsuit against Pastor Obiora Okeke and Redeemer's Gospel Church for workplace harassment, defamation, and abuse of power. Additionally, we're filing complaints with the Nigerian Council of Churches and pursuing criminal charges where applicable." The theater exploded again. Shouts, arguments, applause, condemnation. News crews rushed to get better angles. Social media lit up with real-time reactions. And through it all, Adanna watched Obiora. Watched the man who'd humiliated her publicly crumble under the weight of his own hypocrisy. She expected to feel vindicated. Victorious even. Instead, she felt sad. Sad that it had taken this much drama, this much exposure, this much pain for accountability to even begin. Sad that Amara had sacrificed her privacy and her marriage to stop her husband. Sad that 17 women had to expose their deepest wounds on a public stage because quiet justice was unavailable to them. Movement at the back caught her attention. Chukwudi was standing, making his way to the stage. Adanna's entire body tensed. But when he climbed the stage stairs, his expression wasn't confrontational. It was defeated. "I need to say something," he said into the microphone. Adanna reluctantly surrendered. "I came here tonight thinking I was doing the right thing. Fighting for my daughter. Being a father." He paused, his voice cracking. "But watching this, hearing these stories, I realize I'm not that different from Pastor Okeke." The audience quieted, surprised. "I abandoned Adanna when she was most vulnerable. I let her struggle alone. I let her make impossible choices while I finished school and built a career. And then, when she became visible, when her survival became public knowledge, I used that visibility to resurrect my own reputation as the repentant father." He turned to face Adanna directly. "I don't deserve forgiveness. I don't deserve custody. I don't even deserve to know my daughter. I'm withdrawing my petition. And I'm publicly apologizing, not because it fixes anything, but because you deserve to hear it said out loud, in front of witnesses. I'm sorry. For everything." Adanna couldn't speak. Tears streamed down her face. Complicated tears that held anger and relief and grief and a tiny fragile seed of something that might eventually become forgiveness. "Comment your thoughts on her redemption below." Chisholm's voice suddenly rang through the theater. "Mama!" Adanna turned to see her daughter running down the aisle, Emeka's wife chasing after her. Chisholm leaped onto the stage and threw her arms around Adanna's waist. "Are you okay, Mama? Why is everyone shouting?" Adanna knelt, holding her daughter close, aware that every camera in the room was capturing this moment. "I'm okay, my love. We're going to be okay." She looked up at the audience, at the journalists, the activists, the curious citizens, the wounded congregation members, the women who'd come seeking validation. She looked at Chukwudi standing awkwardly to the side, at Amara wiping tears from her face, at Dr. Nena watching with fierce pride. And she made a decision. "I want to say one more thing," Adanna announced, standing with Chisholm still clinging to her. "This forum was supposed to be about exposing hypocrisy and demanding justice. And it has been. But it's also become something else. A space where we've all had to confront hard truths about ourselves, our society, our churches, our families." She gestured to the Redeemer's Gospel section, where fewer than half the congregation remained. "I don't hate you. I don't even hate Pastor Obiora, though I should. I'm just tired. Tired of a world where women pay endlessly for survival while men's sins are called mistakes. Tired of churches that preach grace but practice condemnation. Tired of fighting just to exist with dignity." The theater was utterly silent now, even the journalists still. "So here's what I propose," Adanna continued. "Dr. Nena and her team will pursue justice through the courts. That's important. But I'm proposing something else. A coalition of women from across Nigeria, survivors of trafficking, exploitation, abuse, judgment, who will create safe spaces for other women. who will provide legal aid, job training, counseling, and most importantly, community. Because the opposite of shame isn't just vindication. It's belonging. She looked at the 16 women standing with her. Are you with me? They nodded, one by one, even skeptical Kemi. We'll need funding, Blessing the lawyer said practically. Space. Resources. I'll donate, a voice called from the audience. An elderly woman stood, elegant in traditional Iro and buba. I'm Chief Mrs. Folashade Attaboy, and I run a foundation for women's empowerment. I'll match whatever funding you raise, up to 50 million naira. Other voices joined in. A businessman offering office space. A doctor offering free medical services. A lawyer volunteering legal aid. One by one, audience members pledged support. Obiora, still standing in the aisle surrounded by security, watched his congregation splinter and a new community form in real time. Finally he spoke, his voice small and defeated. I'm sorry. Everyone turned to him. I know that's not enough, he continued. I know I can't undo the harm. But I am sorry. For all of it. For using my power to hurt people instead of help them. For hiding behind religion while living a lie. For everything. Amara looked at him across the theater, her expression unreadable. Then she turned away. Not forgiveness exactly, but acknowledgement. A beginning. 3 months later, Adanna stood in the newly opened offices of the Redeemer Women's Coalition, named ironically, deliberately, to reclaim the language of redemption from those who'd weaponized it. The coalition occupied 3 floors of a renovated building in Yaba, funded by Chief Mrs. Attaboy's donation and a viral crowdfunding campaign that had raised over 80 million naira. They'd helped 43 women in their first 12 weeks. Legal aid for custody battles. Job placement for women with criminal records. Therapy for trauma survivors. A network that said, your past does not define your worth. Chisholm played in the children's corner they'd built, safe and happy and unaware that her mother had become an accidental activist. The Abuja job offer had fallen through once Adanna became too visible, too controversial. But somehow, running the coalition with the 16 other women felt more right than any office job ever could. Dr. Nena appeared in the doorway. The verdict came through. The airline is settling. 2 million naira in damages. Plus they're implementing new anti-discrimination training for all staff. Adanna smiled. It wasn't much in the grand scheme. But it was something. A precedent. A tiny crack in a massive wall. And Obiora? She asked. Stripped of his pastoral license by the Nigerian Council of Churches. The church itself is under investigation. Several board members have resigned. He's giving interviews now, trying to rebuild as a reformed leader who fell and rose again. Dr. Nena rolled her eyes. Of course. Some stories, Adanna had learned, didn't end with neat closure. Obiora would probably reinvent himself somewhere, his charisma and connections cushioning his fall. Chukwudi sent monthly support payments now, though he hadn't asked to see Chisholm, perhaps sensing that his daughter needed more time, or perhaps simply relieved to have escaped the custody battle with his reputation somewhat intact. But other stories had better endings. Patience's restaurant was thriving again, supported by coalition members and allies. Blessing the lawyer had been hired by Dr. Nena's firm. Kemi was in university, studying social work, determined to help other trafficking survivors. And Adanna? She was learning to live with visibility. Learning that shame only had power if she accepted it. Learning that redemption wasn't something granted by churches or courts or public opinion, but something she could claim for herself. Her phone buzzed. A text from Amara, divorce finalized. I'm free. Coffee tomorrow. Adanna smiled and texted back. My office, 10 a.m. Welcome to the coalition. She walked to the window, looking out at Lagos. Chaotic, brutal, beautiful Lagos, where millions of people survived and struggled and sometimes, against all odds, thrived. Somewhere in this city, another woman was making impossible choices. Another girl was being trafficked. Another survivor was hiding from her past. But now, at least, there was somewhere they could turn. A coalition of women who'd been through fire and emerged, if not unscathed, then at least unbowed. Adanna pressed her palm against the window glass, feeling the vibrations of the city below. She'd been kicked off a plane, humiliated, exposed, dragged through public shame and private hell. And somehow, impossibly, she'd survived. They all had. "Mama!" Chisholm called. "Come see what I drew." Adanna turned from the window, from the endless sprawl of Lagos, from the complicated work of redemption, and walked toward her daughter's voice. Toward the future they were building together. One story at a time. The end. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who loves emotional drama. What would you have done in Adanna's situation? Comment below and let us know if you want more stories like this. Remember, redemption isn't given, it's claimed. Hit that notification bell to catch our next powerful story.